Okay, I think we can slowly start our class, right? Good morning, everyone. So, as usual, we are supposed to begin the class with your discussion, right? So now you have followed several classes, and also some of you have submitted your summary of the introduction to this book, A Comprehensive Manual of Abhidhamma, right? Because Buddhist introduction. That is quite good, and some of you have not submitted yet. So you can either share your understanding based on the previous lecture, or if you would like to share some of your thoughts based on your reading of this introduction, you are welcome. Okay, so who would like to present your understanding of the class or the introduction? Venerable Indaka, do you have anything to say? Yeah. Pedagogical teaching. Yeah. Yeah. Good. Yes, so you have pointed out two different methods of presentation. One in the suttas, the other is in the Abhidhamma, right? Yeah, so in the suttas, we will come to that later on when we will focus on discussing uh, methods of presentation, because when you talk about the methods of presentation of the teachings within Abhidhamma Pitaka, you have to bring up the topic of discussion with regard to the methods in Sutta Pitaka as well, right? So most of the cases, if you look at the suttas, you would find that there is the teachings are most of the time, how do you say, um, presented in a very simplistic way so that it is understandable by the audience, and the teachings are presented with so many similes and metaphors. So this pedagogical approach is adopted, right? But in the case of Abhidhamma, it is more meticulous, you can say, meticulous and very much systematic. So in a way, it is called a systematization of Buddha's teaching. Okay, so the Abhidhamma literature actually represent the um, philosophical aspect of the Buddha's teachings. So it represents a philosophical presentation of the teachings of the Buddha, right? Otherwise, if you look at the suttas, you would find everything everywhere, right? So it is not considered as a systematic presentation, and probably it was not intended also by the Buddha, right? So he taught for about 45 years, and wherever he approached, whoever he approached, he just wanted to help them in various ways. If a teaching is not understood by the audience, he would make use of simile and metaphors, right? But in the case of Abhidhamma, these Abhidhammikas or Abhidhamma masters, as we have been discussing, it was a period when people have been, debating and discussing and having dialogues with regard to teachings of different schools, right? So the Buddhist masters, the Buddhist Abhidhammika teachers have to come up with their own exposition, right? So yeah, so you would find a systematic presentation of the teachings in different books, except Pugala Panyati that we have mentioned earlier, which according to some scholars actually does not really represent the Abhidhamma characteristics, because it provides just listing of Pugalas, right, without providing further expositions and so on. Katavattu, for example, represents the actual debates that took place in 3rd century BC, right? So it documents some of the debates within this text, and how the Vibhajyavadins, representative of Theravadins, right? So Vibhajyavada is equated with Theravada later on, countering these arguments and questions proposed by people belonging to other Buddhist or non-Buddhist schools, right? Yes, two different ways of presentation. What is the other thing you mentioned? Okay. Anyone else? Psychology, philosophy, and ethics. And how do you understand them? How they are presented in Abhidhamma?
philosophy and for the psychology.
There is a phrase that is used by Bhikkhu Bodhi in his book, right? What is it? Psychological ethics. But then the word philosophy is left out, right? Yeah, that is in a different context. I see. So yeah, now you have got psychological aspect, philosophical aspect, and ethical aspect within the discussion of Abhidhamma. That is what is stated. Now, it is clear when you talk about ethical aspect to be present in the Abhidhamma discussion. It is present in suttas everywhere, right? So ethics is given very much importance in the Buddhist practice, in the Buddhist teaching. Even when you talk about Sila, Samadhi, Panya, Sila comes first, right? So based on ethics, you develop your mind, right? You establish your mind with a certain, in a certain object and develop your concentration. And when your mind is sufficiently developed, then only you are able to understand the reality of nature accurately, and then you generate wisdom, right? And this wisdom leads to vimutti, liberation. So that is how it is presented in the suttas. In the Abhidhamma also, you would find in the Abhidhammic discussion the ethical aspect. In the last class, we have been talking about this different avachara spheres: kama avachara, rupa avachara, arupa avachara, right? And then those paramatta beings, right? Lokuttara chitta. So you have these four divisions. Now in this kama vachara, rupa vachara, arupa vachara, and lokuttara, there is this function of kusala and akusala, right? And of course you have kriya and vipaka aspect of the chittas as well. But if you take up this discussion of kusala and akusala, kusala particularly represent wholesome aspect, right? So that is good side and good practice of the people, and akusala represent unwholesome. So kusala is rooted in wholesome thoughts, akusala is rooted in unwholesome thoughts. So here you find the discussion of ethics, and why it is important. Very generally, as you can see in this verse in the Dhammapada, sabba papasa karanam kusalasa upasampada, right? Sabba papasa karanam kusalasa upasampada. Very straightforward teaching. Try to avoid all kind of evil deeds, evil thoughts, evil actions, bad actions, and try to, perform and be engaged in good thoughts, good actions. And how do you differentiate between good and bad? There are different criteria. One of the popular criteria is that if your action, thoughts, or speech is rooted in unwholesome psychological aspect, right? Unwholesome psychology, unwholesome mentalities, greed, hatred, delusion, jealousy, right? All this unwholesome psychology, then it is definitely going to be bad actions. On the contrary, if it is rooted in wholesome thoughts, generosity, compassion, loving kindness, wisdom, and so on, it is going to be a good action. The other criteria provided is that if your action brings harmful result for yourself and for others, for the society, that is considered to be a bad action, and the opposite is referred to as a good action, right? So in the Abhidhammic teaching, you have this discussion, because in line with the Buddha's original intention, original focus, the purpose of Abhidhamma is to help you to proceed in the direction of liberation. And that you can do only by avoiding evils and by doing good. So therefore, you have this discussion of ethics. Now, why there is this psychological aspect? How do you get it? Because it is ultimately intention, right? That is kamma. Chatanahang bhikkave kammang vadami. Right? It is your intention that represents the kamma. And it is a psychological aspect. Where do you have all these kusala and akusala chittas, kusala and akusala intentions in your mind? Right? Therefore, the stress, the focus is on the mind. Chittena niyati loko. The world is led by the mind. Right? So everything arises within the mind first. Then only you carry out the actions externally. Therefore, the focus is on the psychology, on the mind. Even when you talk about all these different avacharas, different sphere, different existences, kama avachara, rupa avachara, arupa avachara, within this very body that you are having and the mind, at this moment, if you go through a certain practice, now for example, you are dwelling in a kama avachara world, right? You can move forward from this kama avachara world to the rupa avachara world, rupa avachara sphere, when you are established in the rupa jhanas. And as you progress with your practice, you enter into arupa jhanas. There is no difference between your experience of arupa sphere and the beings in the arupa world. You are in the state of arupa avachara. And you progress further, you can become a lokuttara being, where you transcend this limitation of lokiya aspect, and then you move towards the lokuttara sphere. You become from how do you say, from putujjana to arya puggala, from a worldly being to a noble being, noble person. And according to Buddhist literature, you have these 4 pairs of 8 noble beings, right? What are these 4 pairs of 8 noble beings? Sorry? Yeah. So those who are in the maggas and those who obtain the phalas. So you have Sotapatti magga, Sotapatti phala, Sakadagami magga, Sakadagami phala, Anagami magga, Anagami phala, and Arahatta magga and Arahatta phala. So among these 8 types of beings, the last one, number 8, is considered to be highest, in the sense that he is called aseka, whereas the other 7 are categorized as seka. Why is it so? Yeah, so what is the meaning of seka, and what is the meaning of aseka? Yeah. Yeah, true. Right. Therefore, they go beyond learning, because whatever need to be learned, they have mastered it. Therefore, once somebody become an arahant, the thought and idea that comes to his mind, and as you can see in many of the suttas, it is expressed. How it is expressed? Kina jate vositam brahmacharyam katankaraniyam na parang itatayanti. Right? Hina jati, birth is destroyed. Now, of course, we have to keep in mind our understanding and their understanding. Okay, so our understanding of life and everything and their understanding is different. So therefore, we always have to keep this in mind. I saw that in some cases, most of the time, there is a kind of confusion that goes on among us, among you, is that always you try to mix up conventional, presentation of the teaching with the ultimate way of presentation of the teaching. Now, you talk about Buddha or any enlightened beings, Acharya Nagarjuna, who is very popular because of his, philosophical standpoint, right? Very much discussed among the scholastic world. And, when you talk about any aspect of Buddha's teaching, very quickly, a few points and questions that arise is that if you talk about anatta, if you talk about emptiness, if we do not exist, then who are we? Why we are studying, right? Who is performing karma? Who is going to experience the result? You see, these questions are legitimate to some extent in some context, but as a student of Buddhism, you have to approach these topics of discussion very systematically, so that when you talk about a certain teaching such as this, you exactly know your ground, right? Based on what context and so on that you are talking about these teachings. We are putujanas. We are living in this samsara. So everything that is going on in the samsara is real for us. It is like we are dreaming. In the dream, until you wake up, everything is real. Until you wake up. Okay, so when you wake up, then you know that your dream was an illusion. It was not real. Right? But when you are dreaming, that is very much real to you. And then from your dream state, if you want to think how you would feel once you wake up about your dream, that is not going to happen. So our effort is to have, first of all, of course, to complete your degrees, your courses, right? And secondly, to have a better understanding of the teaching, at least intellectually, so that we become, we accumulate some kind of merits, and, we have a certain, how do you say, we create a certain type of samskara, good samskara, right? So that we can move forward in the teaching of the Buddha. And in some cases, if you are very serious with learning and practice of Buddha's teaching, you really, you are really convinced by the teaching of the Buddha, you take up the practice seriously, and then you walk in the path of the Buddhas and Arahants. What about the philosophical aspect? Philosophical aspect is that when you look at the presentation of the Abhidhamma, what is the characteristics of philosophical presentation? It is very systematic. There are questions, there are answers, there are analysis. Very systematic presentation. These represent Buddhist philosophy. Probably Buddhist philosophy of the Theravada tradition, you can say, because now there are many tradition, right? There is Mahayana tradition, Vajrayana tradition, right? There are different traditions. So you can say that Theravada Abhidhamma represent the philosophical tradition of Theravada Buddhism. Yeah. Any other remark? True. Yes, even the Pitaka also, the addition of the Pitaka, the addition of Attakatha, Tika, whatever that exists. Of course, later on you have some sub commentaries and some other text produced in some regional countries like Myanmar, Thailand, and so on. But when we talk about an authentic presentation of canonical text and commentarial text, normally it is referred to the editions made by Acharya Buddhaghosa, right? But when you look at this edition made by Polytech Society in England, you would find that in most of the text, they, I think, looked at a few editions, a few versions. Most often, a version from Sri Lanka, Sinhala edition, and sometimes from Burmese edition as well. That time, I'm not sure. They did not refer to so much, the Thai editions. Probably it was not accessible to them. But nowadays, of course, you have all these editions available. Anyone from online would like to share anything? Yes. Sarvastivada, yeah. Yes. Not exactly, similar. The presentation of, the teaching in the Sarvastivada Abhidhamma is, of course, different. They also talk about dharmas, but the number of dharmas is different. The number of dharmas that they came up with is different. The explanation is different. One of the distinctive difference between Sarvastivada Abhidhamma and Theravada Abhidhamma is that in the Sarvastivada Abhidhamma, they talk about tritemporal existence of dharmas in 3 periods of time. They also talk about the swabhava of dharmas. And when there is a discussion of asankata Dhamma, in the Theravada Abhidhamma, you have just one asankata, that is Nibbana, whereas in the Sarvastivada Abhidhamma, that talk about 3 asankatas. Okay, space being one of them, for example. It's not conditioned, right? So there are differences, but as long as the presentation of the teaching concerns, the essential teaching is of course the same, because they are all trying to understand the functioning of chitta, the functioning of chaitasika, rupa, and then how do you overcome this limitation in samsara and move towards nibbana. So as long as these aspects are concerned, yes. these are just traditional presentations. Now, it doesn't really matter. It only matters when you want to know how a particular text came to be. That's all. So you just try to understand. Otherwise, there is no way that you can prove exactly who spoke the Abhidhamma first. Now, when we talk about Buddha giving the Abhidhamma teaching in heaven and then coming down to the earth and sharing his Abhidhamma knowledge to Sariputta, and that is how the entire Abhidhamma literature developed according to Theravada tradition. You find this information in text. And if you take the text as authentic, document, you believe every single word. Or, you take it literally. Or if you want to understand the underlying importance that is given with this account of the presentation and presentation of Abhidhamma teaching in the tradition, you can have a different understanding that when there is a talk about Buddha giving Abhidhamma teaching to heaven, there is a particular context to it. One is that he wanted to, pay back the debt of his mom, right? So he wanted to, because when he was born, after 1 week, his mother passed away and she was born in this particular heaven. So he wanted to visit her, meet her, and give her the Dhamma teaching. So it is this event, if you just imagine, it is a very powerful, moment. Somebody who became a Buddha and he went, above and beyond samsara. He is considered to be a teacher of gods and men, right? Sattadeva Manusana. He's reflecting and he's taking effort to paying back his debt to his mom, right? He's remembering his mom, and then he want to help his mother to get some understanding of the Dhamma. So that is a very powerful, emotion you can see. The other is that when you talk about heavens, devas, generally there is this understanding that heavens are higher than human worlds. Heavenly beings are superior. So automatically you attach the understanding or the idea of superiority, excellence to the teaching. And it is given by the Buddha, right? And then next, when you talk about Buddha sharing his Abhidhamma knowledge to Sariputta, again, Sariputta is considered to be, very wise in terms of wisdom, in terms of panya and wisdom. He is said to be next only to the Buddha, second to the Buddha. So among all his disciples, all the Buddha's disciples, Sariputta stands supreme, right? So in that context also, you attach Abhidhamma to a person who is very much talented, an excellent student, right? He's the one who is able to understand and explain and interpret. So that is how traditionally the Abhidhamma teaching is attached to these higher beings and, with all this account, so that you pay more attention, more respect to Abhidhamma. And when we have been discussing about this expression Dhamma and Abhidhamma, Abhi word is used to refer to this Dhamma to mean not exactly, higher teaching than the Sutta, but to mean, in a way, higher presentation, right, to the teaching of the Buddha, in the sense that these represent an ascetics, a realized person's mind. Otherwise, how do you count the mind moment? Is there any way of understanding this mind movement, rupa movement? How many chittas are there that are functioning? So you just have to accept their explanation and try to understand. You cannot really counter them unless you yourself have that experience. So that is how this higher status is attached with the Abhidhamma teaching. In the Sarvastivada tradition, probably they have a different understanding. Of course, it is attached to Sariputta, I think, the main text, right? From there, the other commentaries developed. One is attached to, I think, even Kachayana or Katyayani Putra, right? Even he is considered as one of the topmost disciple of the Buddha. But then again, there are discussions of different Sariputtas and different Kachayanas. So that is a zone of scholastic study. Any other question? Yeah. Because Dhamma Sangani represent the analytical aspect of the teaching, and Patthana represent the synthesizing aspect of the teaching. So basically, these two methods are adopted in the Abhidhamma literature, and it is very, very important. Today, we will be discussing the Dhamma theory, and you will come to know why these two approaches are important. What is it? Abhidhamma, you mean this Abhidhammata Sangaha? This text? Yes, this text, I told you in the first class, I think it represents a kind of an introduction, yes, summary of the 7 texts. It presents very briefly the main teachings of the Abhidhamma Pitaka. So you study this seriously, you become familiar with the Abhidhamma teaching, and then you can take up any Abhidhamma text to understand better. But this is produced much later in 12th or 13th century by a certain monk called Anuruddha, I think. Right? Yeah. So, of course, yes. Yeah, any question from the online student?
Hello, teacher, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear.
My internet is connection's very terrible today, so I wasn't sure about that. Okay, I think that there's something in the introduction that doesn't quite make sense, because in the concerning the origin of the Abhidhamma, it is said that the Abhidhamma has to be taught, has to be presented to a single group of audience in a single session for a complete understanding. So that's why the Buddha actually taught the Abhidhamma to the devas instead of to the human, because they are the only ones that could stay that long for 3 months. But according to I'm not sure about yours, but according to our tradition, the time works differently between the realm of people and the realm of in the heaven or the realm of devas. So traditionally, it is believed that although it took 3 months in the as human time, it only took about 7 days for the Buddha to taught the teaching. So is there do you think it was the same 3 months and 3 months, or is it shorter or something?
So the tradition says that he spent 1 vasa, right?
Yes, but
Yeah. So how do
according
you
to
come up with 7 days?
I think there's a calculation between the difference between different realms of gods. Each the realm that he taught the Abhidhamma is 7 days in their time.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, if you are counting the time periods from that point of view, that is a different matter. But I think we discussed it earlier. How do you understand heaven, right?
Yes.
Is it somewhere else? And how do you count this time difference? And of course, if you are not in heaven now, you will not be able to understand the heavenly life and the time period that they are experiencing. But then again, the question is, we try to understand it in terms of different states of mind that we have, right? For example, when we go through a severe headache, 5 minutes appear to be 1 hour, right? Whereas when you are in a blissful state, you are happy, spending your time with friends, 5 days appear to be just very short, right? So I'm not sure about this counting of period, but when you say that in one session this Abhidhamma teaching should be given, now of course it is not referring to this 7 text, I'm sure, right? Because we know that this text developed much later, between 2nd to 3rd century BC, right? So, but if you talk about the gist of Abhidhamma and what it is, probably it is just an understanding of mind and matter in great detail, so that people are able to see that there is no self, right? And therefore, you gradually overcome this misconception with regard to self and everything, and then you realize the truth. If it is so, I think in any case, even when the Buddha was giving the teaching to some of his students here on the planet, on earth, it was happening within 1 session. So, and we have been discussing that this Abhidhamma, what is this Abhidhammic understanding? Just now we have been talking about this mind movements and Rupa movements and everything. How do you perceive? How do you have a clearer understanding? When do you have this clearer understanding? Once you have that, the process may take some time, but once you have that, that happens within 1 session, within 1 moment. So,
but it's still funny that although that it says it has to be presented in a single session to a single group of audience, and it took 3 months, but then it also says that the Buddha came down to the human world every day to fulfill his nutrient needs, and then taught a summary to the Sariputta. So it has to be in a single world, right?
probably, but as I said, do not try to. There are a few things that we need to keep in mind. One is that do not just try to read them literally, try to understand them literally. Okay, that is one thing. We need to try to understand what is the meaning that is conveyed by these, legends, stories, or discussions. And the other is that there is something that Buddhas and Arahants can do that are beyond our thinking, beyond our sphere of mind. So even from this discussion, I'm not sure if we'll be really, understand fully what is explained as they have been doing and so on.
So
quite...
in a way,
Sure.
you're saying that we'll never fully understand the essence of this Abhidhamma unless we actually practice it and come to a level of understanding.
That is true, as long as this clearer understanding of Abhidhamma is concerned. But this Abhidhamma texts are presented as a device, so that it can influence us. It can give us some insight, to progress in the path. So, yeah, this is one thing that I mentioned earlier also. When you are engaging in discussion or reading or thinking about it, you are not wasting your time. You are practicing. But it all depends on your thought, your intention. If you say that, no, I'm just reading it because I need to write a summary, and then I need to get 10 marks out of this summary, that is a different matter. But when you are reading, of course, you make notes. As I said, you make notes so that things become clearer to you, right? But as you engage in reading or thinking, if it inspires you, if it engages you deeply, that becomes part of your practice, because something is happening in your mind, in your heart, that is changing your mind and your heart. So that becomes practice. Otherwise, what does it mean by practice and everything? All these things. It is just, ultimately, we are living in this samsara with this strong idea of I, and you just become free from this I. You let loose this idea of I, and then you are out of samsara, right? So where does this change take place? It doesn't take place somewhere else. You see? Sometimes it can be sudden if you are really fully engaged in the practice. Sometimes it takes time. So as I said, we have been creating good samskara, right?
Okay, teacher,
yes.
Thank you.
Any other question? I think some of you are having some difficulties in, connecting to the class, because I have to keep on admitting some of you always. I don't know.
The electricity is out, teacher, so the connection is not very good here.
Yes, who else is present? So everybody has to participate in the discussion, not just a few of you, because those people who are engaging in discussion, they will be, stealing all of your marks also. So you have to be careful.
Yes, Brandy, yeah.
Who is it? Okay.
Yeah, I was one of the Patana. Yeah, because the Atasa Lindi said that in the 4 week, the Buddha got up enlightenment. Yes, he contemplated the 6 bowls, and he wasn't having anything. After that, he contemplates the Patana. He was very powerful with his body. That's why, yes, the Abhidhamma was very great in my mind. Yes. And also the original the Abhidhamma, yeah, I have read. Why the modern critical scholarships attempt to explain the formation of the Abhidhamma. Yeah. Yes. Yes, because I think the Abhidhamma was a processing great evolutionary. Yes, they work such any evidence. Yeah, they won't come to realize anything about Abhidhamma Pitaka. Yes, that's all, Andy.
Sorry, I did not clearly understand your question. If you like, you can write it down also. I think you are talking about Patthana, right?
I don't think it was a question. He was trying to share a little bit of his understanding, I guess. It's not. It was not a question.
Oh, I see. I think he's talking something about the Patthana, right? Yeah. Anyway, is there any question with regard to your topics for writing essays? Yeah. Nibbana is a Sankata. What can you discuss? That is your topic, right? That is the topic of your essay? Yeah. That is why. Okay. We will try to find some information upon Nibbana. Otherwise, I think you'd be just writing the title only for your essay. Okay.
And I found that the phonetic process is the huge one. They have two processes. One is the phonetic process between the consonants. Another one is out of the consonants. Everything on this speaker the binomial. So in other words, means that my topic teacher to improve the process. Also.
Yes, right. You need to cover both aspects. Without one, you cannot explain the other. Right? You have to make clear one aspect of it. You have to say a little bit about the other aspect as well. Okay.
So, teacher, I also have a question regarding my topic.
Okay.
So the Buddha became all omniscient when he studied, when he contemplated the Patthana. So my topic is conditional relations. Relational conditions. So is also Patthana. So would it be the same in my case when I studied the Patthana?
Hopefully, when you study the Patthana, when you finish your essay, hopefully you would experience something like him.
Yeah, hopefully, yeah.
Let's hope that. Okay. So, okay, let's continue with the usual lecture. We need to finish this very quickly before the break. Sorry? There are two different approaches, right? Psychology refers to your psychological aspect, psychological functioning of your mind. And then philosophy represents a different thing. Philosophy represents how it is all presented systematically. Of course, yes. There is a question here, Pariyaya and Nipariyaya. Is this the twofold method in Abhidhamma teaching? Not exactly. You have this Pariyaya and Nipariyaya presentation when you talk about Samuti and Paramatta actually. So two ways of understanding the same thing. One is understanding things in a more conventional way. For example, I, you, man, human being, tree, animals, right? Table, chair. Whereas in the Paramatta sense, you try to understand them in terms of dharmas, functioning of dharmas, chittas, chaitasikas, rupas, and I hope we'll be able to look at this picture of 89 chittas and how many chaitasikas are present in each different chitta, right? So that is the presentation of Paramatta way, and this Pariyaya, Nipariyaya in a way correspond to this Sammuti and Paramatta ways of presentation. When there is a discussion of two methods, it refers to analysis and synthesis. So in the analysis, you dissect something into different parts. So you divide the whole into parts. For example, a human being you divide into 5 aggregates. That is in the Sutta presentation. But in the Abhidhamma, into Chitta, Chaitasika, and so on. Okay, in different categories. Kama Vachara, Rupa Vachara, right? Vipaka Chitta or Kiriya Chitta. In this particular way, you try to understand by analyzing. And but if you just keep on following this method, if you just analyze things, then you have at certain period, you may have an understanding that actually when you dissect everything, there is nothing. So you reach to the understanding of annihilationism or nihilism. Nothing exists. And that is a dangerous view. That is one extreme that one should avoid. And to avoid that, this Abhidhammikas came up with the presentation of synthesis. Okay. You can mentally dissect things, but what you see is a synthesis. Yeah. So therefore, you see things, how things are happening based on multiple causes and conditions. There are multiple results taking place. That is how you see things. And this dissection is a sphere of this Arya Puggalas. Okay, so let's continue with the usual discussion. We have been talking about Abhidhamma and its origins generally, and this was our final part in that discussion. Here, I have presented very briefly about the 7 texts and their contents. Okay, so if you want to know more about these 7 texts, and you can of course look at these 7 texts themselves, but they are, each text is quite big. You can at least look at the introduction part to all these 7 texts, okay, so that you can have a better understanding about this text. And also, if I remember correctly, in the course outline, there is a book in the list of bibliography that I have written down. I do not have the course outline. So there is a text that is called Guide Through Abhidhamma Pitaka by Jnana Tiloka Mahathera. Guide Through Abhidhamma Pitaka. In this book also you would find presentation of this 7 texts. Okay, a brief discussion of this 7 texts. Okay, so the first of the 7 texts is called Dhamma Sangani. It has got 4 divisions, okay, 4 different chapters. First chapter represents classification of consciousness, that is Chitta. And second chapter represent Rupa. Third chapter provides a kind of a summary. And fourth chapter provides exposition or further explanation on the topics discussed above. The chapter of the classification of consciousness, which is called Panchakanda, presents 89 types of consciousness in 13 classes. In the classification of consciousness, there are 8 classes of moral states arising in the sensuous universe, that is in the Kama Vachara. 12 classes of immoral states, so you have 8 Kusala Chittas and then 12 Akusala. 16 results of good, these are Kusala Vipaka. 7 results of evil, Akusala Vipaka. 11 inoperatives, these are Kiriya. 5 classes of moral states arising in the universe of attenuated matter. So this belongs to Rupa Vachara world. 5 results thereof, 5 corresponding inoperatives. 4 classes of moral states arising in the immaterial universe. This comes under Arupa Vachara world. 4 results thereof, 4 corresponding inoperatives. 4 transcendental states. These are Paramatta Chittas. 4 results thereof. 89 classes in all, constituting the divisions of consciousness. It is also called the chapter on states of consciousness. In extent of utterance, it exceeds 6 recitals, but is endless and immeasurable when expanded. So you would find these words being mentioned in, with regard to each book. Recitals, Bhanavara is the word. So this seems to be a kind of, counting system that existed. Sometimes it refers to a certain verses. Certain verses constitute one recital and so on. But by the word itself, what is clear is that when they probably start to recite something, they have a certain, how do you say, they have divided this recitation in terms of times, in terms of fractions and so on. That is how they have counted. Like now you can say that in this particular book you have this many chapter, or for this encyclopedia you have this many volumes. So they have been counting at that time this text in terms of recitals. How many recitals? Bhanavara. Okay, so according to that, this text has 6 recitals, more than 6 recitals. But if you start to explain the teaching contained within these recitals, it could be endless, immeasurable. Okay, that is the meaning here. In terms of utterance, it exceeds 6 recitals. Yeah, usually consists of 250 stanzas of 32 syllables. So here is a description of recitals of Bhanavara. A stanza consists of 4 feet of 8 syllables each, but is endless and immeasurable when expanded. So 250 stanzas. In the second chapter, you have this presentation on the classification of matter, presented as Ekaka, Dukkha, etc., and it exceeds 2 recitals. The chapter of summary, Nikhepa Khanda, Mulato Khandato Chapi, Dwarato Chapi Bhumito, Attato Dhammato Chapi, Namato Chapi, Lingato Nikkipitva Desitatta Nikkepoti Pavuchati. It summarizes roots and aggregates and doors, planes of existence, meaning, text, name, sex, and therefore is called summary. So this represents how things are presented in the section of matter. It has got 3 recitals. They're just a different grouping of rupas in terms of mula, in terms of khanda. Mula means root, khanda aggregates. In terms of door, you see, you have kaya dwara, vachi dwara, right? In terms of bhumi, in terms of meaning, in terms of just dharma or phenomena, okay, in terms of name. So this is how different, how do you say, different grouping and different presentation. For example, femininity, masculinity, you see, and softness, hardness, see, what else? And shape also, yeah, color, shape, yeah. The chapter of elucidation, exposition, this is Attakata Kanda. This is the last chapter. It presents meaning of Tipitaka, constituting Buddha's words. It has got 2 recitals. So altogether, the Dhamma Sangani exceeds 13 recitals. Chitta Vibhatti Rupancha, Nikyapo, Atta Jotana, Gambirang Nipunang Thanang, Thampi Buddhena Desitang, the elements of mind and matter, and the sum, the exposition of the whole, low, deep, and subtle, that the Buddha taught. So this is the ending verse that says that these are the teachings in 4 different chapters that have been taught by the Buddha. This was translated by this lady scholar. She's called C.A.F. Rice Davids. She's the wife of Mr. Rice Davids, who founded Polytext Society in London. So she has translated this text, Dhamma Sangani, and as a translation, this is the title that you can see of the book, A Buddhist Manual of Psychological Ethics. So this is a translation of Dhamma Sangani. This is the second text, Vibhanga. It is quite, easy to, have a understanding of this text generally, because it has got 18 chapters on 18 different topics. Okay. Panchakanda Vibhango, Ayatana Vibhango, Dhatu Vibhango, Satcha Vibhango, Indriya Vibhango, Pachayakara Vibhango, Satipatthana Vibhango, Sammapadhana Vibhango, Iddhipada Vibhango, Bhujanga Vibhango, Magganga Vibhango, Jhananga Vibhango, Appamaya Vibhango, Sikkhapada Vibhango, Padesambhida Vibhango, Jnana Vibhango, Khuddakavattu Vibhango, Dhamma Hadaya Vibhangoti, Attarasa Videna Vibhatta. So these are the 18 chapters. Okay. So Vibhanga means analysis. The analysis of 5 aggregates, analysis of sense sphere, analysis of elements, analysis of truth. So this is how chapters are divided. Most of them are presented following 3-fold method: Suttanta Bhajaniya, Abhidhamma Bhajaniya, Panchakanda. And it contains altogether 35 recitals. So in this text, you would find that when there is a discussion of Khanda Vibhanga, Ayatana Vibhanga, in each different chapter, when there's a discussion on a particular topic, it is approached from 3 different, perspective. One is Suttanta Bhajaniya, how it is generally presented in the suttas, and Abhidhamma Bhajaniya, how it is presented in Abhidhamma, how it should be explained or understood in the Abhidhamma. Panchakanda represent catechism, that is questions and answers. Okay, so based on the description, previous description in these 2 sections, there is then, in a way, it provides you further clarification with regard to the previous discussion. Okay, so this is a different approach to the topic in terms of questions and answers. So this is translated by this monk, Asin Titila. Yeah. And it is called the Book of Analysis. So these are the 18 chapters. This is how you have 35 recitals. There are certain chapters that do not have 3-fold exposition. For example, Indriya. For the Indriya, you do not have Suttanta explanation. You have just Abhidhamma and Panchakanda. And for this one, Pachayakara, you do not have Payapuchak. Now, this is the third book, Dhatukata. It has got 14 chapters, and the chapter divisions are interesting. If you look at the explanation here, Tang, Sangaho Asangaho, Sangahitena Asangahitam, Asangahitena Sangahitam, Sangahitena Sangahitam, Asangahitena Asangahitam, Sampayogo Vipayogo, Sampayutena Vipayuttam, Vipayutena Sampayuttam, Sampayutena Sampayuttam, Vipayutena Vipayuttam, Sangahitena Sampayuttam Vipayuttam, Sampayutena Sangahitam Asangahitam, Asangahitena Sampayuttam Vipayuttam, Vipayutena Sangahitam Asangahitanti, Chuddasa Videna Vibattam. It has got 6 recitals. Now, basically here you would find that the presentation of dhatus in terms of sangaha, asangaha, sampayoga, vipayoga, right? So sangaha means putting together, right? Asangaha, separating. So as sangaho and asangaho, it is very clear that things are presented in terms of putting them together or separating, analyzing, right? Sangahitena asangahitam means asangahitam, separating them, analyzing them, sangahitena, by way of putting them together. So that means they are here following a different approach, that is probably dharmas of a particular characteristics are put together in one place. It is like when you talk about okay, a very simple example. With your eyes, you see a form, right? And then after seeing the form, you generate a kind of perception and feeling. First of all, you know that, for example, it is a flower. It is a red colored flower. That is your perception. That is your understanding. And then you generate a kind of feeling that I like it or I do not like it. Right? So in this process, what happens is that your rupa is functioning, that is eye, chakku indriya. And there is external rupa out there, right? And then when there is this contact, hassa, there is a consciousness, vijnana. There is also perception and vedana. Okay, now how many dharmas or how many aspects you count? After that, you try to separate them in terms of rupa and chitta. How many rupa factors are present? How many chitta factors are present? What about vedana, sanya, and vijnana? Do they come under chitta factor? Right? And then again, when you say I like, I do not like, accordingly, you have different intention and feeling towards this object. It could be kusala, akusala. It could be abhyakata, neutral, right? So accordingly, you put them together. So that is why in the presentation here, different approaches, adopted. Asangahitena sangahitam, similar way. Here, you look at the grouping in terms of separateness. Okay. Sangahitena sangahitam. Asangahitena asangahitam. In the same way, sampayoga, vipayoga. What is the meaning of sampayoga? Association. Vipayoga, dissociation. Right? So in terms of association, in terms of dissociation. So in one chitta, how many Cetasika come together, how many other factors are present? For example, in this example that I have just given to you, attentiveness is one factor, right? You have to pay attention. So that is one Cetasika. And then life faculty, Jivitendriya. You have to be alive to see things, right? Life faculty should be there, prana. Yes. So that is how things are presented here. Puggala Panyati, we have been talking about it. It just, provides you listing of different categories of Puggala, persons. There is 1 person, 2 person, 3 persons, in terms of what? Right? In terms of Seka and Aseka, 2 types of persons, you can say. In terms of Putujjana and Arya Puggala, 2 types of persons. Right? In terms of in terms of how do you say, Vimuttas, you have 3 types of persons: Chato Vimutta, Panya Vimutta, Ubatuvaga Vimutta. Right? In terms of eightfold person, there are 8 types. Right? So more or less, they're talking about the similar type of persons in different, presentations, different numberings, until from 1 until 11, as far as I know. It has got 5 recitals. And Kathavattu, we have discussed about it earlier. This Kathavattu was composed by Mugaliputta Tissatera, and it had a particular purpose, right? He came up with this text because he needed to defend the Vibhajyavada viewpoints as opposed to those that appear to be a kind of a threat towards the Vibhajyavada standpoint. So he had to provide his answers. So he came up with this text, Kathavattu. This was translated by these 2 persons. One is Shui Zhen Ong, and the other is Mrs. Rajdevich. Yamaka is the 6th book. It has got 10 parts. Now it is called Yamaka because the teaching presented here or discussed here are in terms of pairs. Okay, putting 2 things together. Tang Mula Yamakang, Kanda Yamakang, Ayatana Yamakang, Dhatu Yamakang, Satcha Yamakang, Sankara Yamakang, Anusaya Yamakang, Chitta Yamakang, Dhamma Yamakang, Indriya Yamakanti, Dasavidana Vivatta. In most of the text, you would find that the central topic of discussion is the same: Kanda, Ayatana, Dhatu, truth, right? Practice, Satipatthana, Satcha, Anusaya. Anusaya is a unwholesome mentalities, right? Unwholesome psychologies. It has got 120 recitals, and it was translated by somebody whose name I cannot read. And this is the last one, Patthana, the 7th book, divided into 24 parts, but for obvious reason, because it is discussing about 24 Pachayas. Now this is going to be a topic for Venerable Attasaro, so we'll be waiting for his discussion, for his presentation, okay, for his detailed presentation. So these are the 24 Pachayas: Hetu Pachayo, Aramana Pachayo, Adipati Pachayo, Anantara Pachayo, Samanantara Pachayo, Sahajata Pachayo, Ayamaya Pachayo, Nisaya Pachayo, Upanisaya Pachayo, Purejata Pachayo, Pachajata Pachayo, Asevana Pachayo, Kamma Pachayo, Vipaka Pachayo, Ahara Pachayo, Indriya Pachayo, Jhana Pachayo, Magga Pachayo, Sampayutta Pachayo, Vipayutta Pachayo, Atti Pachayo, Natti Pachayo, Vigata Pachayo, Avigata Pachayoti, Pachayavasena Tava, Chatuvisati Videna, Vivattam. I think personally that it is important to have a general understanding of these Pachayas. Then many of the questions that most of us have with regard to, free will, for example, if everything is, whether everything is determined or there is a free will and so on, how things are functioning. If it is just, working in terms of causes and conditions, there are causes and conditions, and then based on the causes and conditions, there are results. If it is like that, then my present moment of existence is depending on my previous moment of existence, and this is how it is continuing. Do I have any chance of changing it, changing the direction? Right? It appears to be all fixed. So this would give you the answer how it is fixed in a certain sense and how it is not fixed in a certain sense. What it is exactly. Okay. So when you talk about this causality or conditionality, cause and effect, it is not that simple. Right? So from here you can see that this causality, this aspect of causality can be approached from 24 different point of view. There could be some hetu functioning, there could be some arammana, there could be some prime causes, adipati, there could be anantara pachaya, samanantara pachaya, sahajata. There could be all kinds of causes and conditions. And this makes existence dynamic. Everything is possible. You can become a Buddha, you can also become a Devadatta. Everything is possible. The possibility is explained very nicely here. This is about the presentation style in terms of dukkha and tika and then combining together, right? Yeah. This you can find from the text that I have sent to you in the expositor. I do not have to go through this. Very briefly, the expositor, the text that I sent to you, commentary to the Dhamma Sangani, it also talks about this 4 sagara, ocean, samsara sagara, jala sagara, naya sagara, jnana sagara. To explain the depthness of Abhidhamma, why it is important to study the Abhidhamma, and why it is difficult, right? And how it should be approached. The samsara sagara refers to ocean of samsara. So we do not know how many lifetimes we have been wandering in this samsara. So we should be aware of that. Once you become aware of that and the suffering involved in this samsara, you do not want to be in samsara anymore, right? Jalasagara, ocean of water. So there is a particular description of an ocean in which the depth of water is so deep. Okay. In a similar way, the presentation of Abhidhamma, the discussion of Abhidhamma is presented that it is very deep. So you have to have specific focus and attention. Nayasagara refers to the methods, different methods involved in presentation. Very briefly, we came across a certain presentation style as well just now, right? From different perspective you can approach. And it is in a way good to study this Abhidhamma, because otherwise most of the time our mindset is fixed. We see things in a particular, with a particular viewpoint, with a particular perspective only. anything. There could be other ways of looking at it, understanding it. Jnana Sagara refers to the knowledge, portion of knowledge, wisdom of the Buddha, wisdom of his disciples. Now, if you and I talk about the wisdom of Buddha and disciples, we have to keep in mind that we are trying to know their wisdom so that we can have this conviction, this potentiality to develop. It is not that we are in a position to understand and evaluate their wisdom. So the perspective should be different. Approach should be different. Pali Abhidhamma literature. Of course, here we are going to focus on the root text, but not exactly the root text. This book, this represent introduction to the 7 texts, and there are commentaries, sub-commentaries, later text that developed. Somebody who is writing on Pali literature can talk about this and provide the presentation later. So that is the end of our discussion with regard to this particular topic. Probably we are going to have a break now. After the break, I will start with the discussion of Dhamma Theory. Any questions so far? I think there is no question, so we can have a break now. Let's have a break for about 10 minutes.
Okay, teacher.
Okay, let us resume our class. So we will be looking at the Dhamma theory now. It is very important to understand this idea of Dharma in Abhidhamma because it is different. The concept is different from the Dhamma in the suttas. Can you close this curtain? Because this fan is just, lit off my eyes. Yeah. Yes. So what is your general understanding of Dhamma? When we say this word Dhamma, what do you understand?
Dhamma mean fair or right.
Sorry?
Dhamma mean right and fair, holiness.
Yeah. So in the Suttanta, Dhamma can mean so many things. One meaning of Dhamma is truth or just law of nature. Another meaning of Dhamma is being righteous, righteousness, as opposed to Adhamma. Dhamma as opposed to Adhamma. For example, in some of the suttas, including this Kuttadanta Sutta, Chakkavatti Sihanada Sutta, even in the Aggregates Sutta also, I think, the Buddha is asking the king to rule a country following the Dhamma, righteous ruling of a country, Dhammena, not Adhammena, not by following wrong means. Dhamma can also mean rules, disciplines. You follow a certain rules, certain disciplines, and that would qualify you a person having Dhamma, right? Dhamma can also be understood in terms of just characteristics or nature. What is the nature of water? What is the nature of fire? Okay, so to refer to the characteristics of a certain thing, word Dhamma is used. So there are few expressions in Buddhism, in Pali terms, Pali expressions, that are very difficult to explain and understand, okay? Because you have to approach them from so many different perspectives to have a fuller understanding. Dhamma is one of such expression. There is one scholar called Charvatsky, T. Charvatsky, from Russia. He passed away a long time back, I think. He wrote a book on Dhamma, understanding the idea of Dhamma only. Okay. The other word is Sankara. Sankara is also an equally difficult term and expression to understand. What does it mean by Sankara? Sometimes Sankara is understood as samsara, samsaric existence, right? Sankara can mean karma. Sankara can mean, all kinds of influences, good or bad. So in English, it has been translated differently as formation, influxes, right? And conditions. And another word, very difficult to understand, is nirvana or nibbana. So Dharma is one of them. Now we are trying to understand the concept of Dhamma in Abhidhamma. So when you talk about Dhamma in Abhidhamma, it does not refer to any particular teaching. It is not referring to teaching or doctrine. The word Dhamma is understood as fundamental factors of existence. Fundamental factors of existence. Basic factors of existence. How things are made up of. Okay? Whatever we experience, whatever we are, and whatever there in the samsara, in the cosmos, what are the fundamental basis of existence? We will come to know if it is talking about ontological existence or the existence in our experience, that is phenomenological existence. Okay. Ontological existence refers to how things are existing in reality. Phenomenological existence refers to how you and I experience things to exist and function. Then there is a question of what is truth, what is reality? Is what I see or experience is truth? Or truth is something that exists throughout the time, independent of my knowing about it. So it doesn't matter how I see or how I know, the truth is different. My understanding is different. My understanding about the reality or truth is different. Right? So you would find the discussion of Dhamma in Abhidhamma, which is called the Dhamma Theory, and it is referred to as a philosophical cornerstone of Abhidhamma philosophy by Professor Karunadasa. I have talked about this book earlier. Look at the first chapter. Is it first chapter? Yeah, real existence. You would have a clearer understanding of what does it mean by Dhamma. Right? So somebody who is going to write on Dhamma theory in Abhidhamma can look at this chapter thoroughly. Is it you? Yeah, and provide your presentation of this theory of Dhamma. Let us look at the description now. General remarks: Dhamma refers to the basic factors of phenomenal existence and that which transcends phenomenal existence. So here, what is basically stated is, by the term Dhamma in Abhidhamma, it refers to both Sankata Dhamma and Asankata Dhamma. That is the understanding here, right? Sankata Dhamma and Asankata Dhamma. Sankata Dhamma means conditioned factors, Asankata unconditioned. Do you remember what are the conditioned factors in the Abhidhamma and what is the unconditioned one? Huh? Out of 4 paramattas, 3 are conditioned Dhamma, Sankata Dhamma, and 1 is Asankata Dhamma. So what is stated here is that by the word Dhamma, it refers to both. But here, the expression that is used is basic factors. So you need to keep this in mind. You are talking about Sankata and Asankata Dhamma, but in terms of basic factors. Antecedent, Sabbe Dhamma Anatta, used in general sense in early text and as technical term in Abhidhamma to mean the basic factors into which all things can be resolved. So here you would find slightly different usage of the term Dhamma. As we have been discussing, with so many connotations, so many meanings, the word Dhamma was used in the Suttanta as well. Now, this is one of the expressions, Sabbe Dhamma Anatta, that comes closer to the Abhidhammic explanation of Dhamma. So when it says, you have 2 more sentences previously, connected to this, right? Sabbe Sankara Anicca, Sabbe Sankara Dukkha, and then Sabbe Dhamma Anatta. So this expression is present in the Suttanta. Now, you would notice that when there is a discussion of Anicca and Dukkha, the word used is Sankara. It is clearly referring to the Sankata Dhamma, functioning of Sankata Dhamma. Right? Sabbe Sankara Anicca, Sabbe Sankara Dukkha, and these represent your existence in samsara. Sabbe Dhamma Anatta. Here, it includes both Sankata Dhamma and Asankata Dhamma. Otherwise, if the sentence was like Sabbe Sankara Anatta, then it would suggest that something that is not Sankata should have a self. Nibbana should have a self. Right? So in this expression, it includes both Sankata and Asankata Dhamma to be anatta. So this idea is very clear, selfless, no soul. So it does not mean that there was a self or soul that is abolished. What it means is that there was no soul or self from the beginning. It was a misconception. And here in the last expression, it says that the basic factors into which all things can be resolved. All things can be resolved, can be analyzed into these basic factors that are referred to as Dharma. The shift of the term's meaning from general to technical represents methodological differences between early Buddhism and the Abhidhamma, from empiricist to rationalist approach. So here what you can see is that between the Suttanta presentation and the Abhidhamma presentation, there is a methodological differences. One could be understood as, understood in terms of empiricist approach. The other is rationalist approach. So when you are talking about philosophical aspect of Abhidhamma, how it is a philosophy, this is what it says, because it follows a rationalist approach, a systematic presentation of ideas, of the teachings, right? Whereas the empiricist approach refers to the practical aspect of it. And this also tells us the focus of the Buddha when the Buddha was alive. His principal focus was to help individuals get out of samsara. Therefore, he would come up with so many approaches to convey the message with similes, metaphors, right? So that people can easily understand the meaning, and then based on their understanding of the teaching, they can carry out their practice and become free from the samsara. That is what it is referring to here when it says empiricist approach. So empiricist approach is associated with Suttanta presentation. Rationalist approach is associated with Abhidhamma presentation. Principal theory. What is the principal theory? All the phenomena of empirical existence are made up of a number of elementary constituents, the ultimate realities behind manifest phenomena. So it is like saying, when you say water, it is actually H2O, right? Or probably something more fundamental than H2O. That is in science. In Buddhism, in the Abhidhamma, what it says is that whatever is happening in the, in our empirical existence, whatever you see, whatever you think, whatever is going on, is made up of a number of elementary constituents. So whatever is happening is not, it doesn't represent the ultimate reality, ultimate truth. There is something deeper going on, and that is referred to as, functioning of elementary constituents, basic factors. Building blocks. Another expression is building blocks of your common sense existence, the ultimate realities behind manifest phenomena. It arose from the need to make sense out of experiences in meditation and was designed as a guide for meditative contemplation and insight. See, not merely for the purpose of intellectual exercise that this Abhidhamma teachings came to exist, even though it is referred to as a philosophical presentation of the teachings of the Buddha. But what it says here is that to make sense out of experiences in meditation, this Abhidhamma literature arose, okay, and it was presented as a guide for meditative contemplation and insight. First of all, the origination of this Abhidhamma literature is, apart from other social and environmental circumstances, it originated from the meditative experiences of the practitioners. And you can relate it to the Buddha's first statement. As soon as he became Buddha, he attained Buddhahood. What was his reaction? Yes, and after that, first of all, he said that I have been wandering in this samsara. Now I have stopped it. I have found out who is the creator behind this, happening, these occurrences, this wandering in samsara. Now it is stopped. So that is with regard to his own, realization, experience about his life. But then he was thinking if there are other beings who could be able to understand it. And then he said that this realization, this understanding of mine is entirely against the stream of the world. It is in the opposite direction, Patisutagami. The world is moving towards one direction. My realization is completely in the opposite direction, right? People are engaged with the idea of self. I exist, I do this, I need to become this, I need to be this, right? Whereas the Buddha's understanding was that there is no I to begin with. That is a wrong conception. And he quickly found out that it is very difficult to explain to people. It is very difficult to convey the message because it will not come in the commonsensical understanding of people. It is against the stream. You can find similar sense here when it says that to make sense out of experiences in meditation, they came up with this Abhidhamma so that people can logically, intellectually understand it, follow it, and then they can take up the meditative practice for their own realization. The Buddha had taught that to perceive the world correctly is to see not self entities and substances, but bare phenomena arising and perishing in accordance with their conditions. So what was the realization of the first monk who realized the truth after the Buddha's first teaching? Venerable Kondanya, what was his utterance? As soon as he attained Sotapanna, what he said? Yang kinchi samudaya dhammam sabbangtang nirodha dhammanti. You see, this statement is repeated here. Bare phenomena refers to the Dhamma. Dhammas arise, Dhammas cease. That is what is truth. That is what is going on. Bare phenomena arising and perishing in accordance with their conditions. So they are not arising and ceasing abruptly, without any logic, without any causality. The Abhidhamma specialist specified exactly what these bare phenomena are and how they interact with other bare phenomena to make up our common sense picture of the world. So the Abhidhammikas have been discussing in the Abhidhamma literature how these Bhaya phenomena function. Bhaya phenomena means you can probably use the expression Suddha Dhamma, pure phenomena, pure Dhamma, or Bhaya phenomena. And of course, we have to keep in mind that the Bhaya phenomena or dharmas that this expression are referring to do not exist as discrete entities. This is also something we have to keep in mind, because as soon as you believe some dharmas, some fundamental blocks of existence to exist independently, you fall into the trap of identity. Okay, you develop the idea of identity. There is something there, something that is existing. It is that something based on which everything comes to be. But it does not also mean that there is nothing there, because then you come up with the other idea that actually there is nothing, right? There is no existence, nothing. That is also an extreme view. So this is what is going to be explained and proven by this professor. How it should be understood, the functioning of Dharma should be understood, and how it represents the middle teaching of the Buddha, Majjhima Desana. Now, I have presented here two expressions. One is Janatu ahang bhikkave passato asavanang khayang vadami no ajanato no apassato. The other expression is Yatha bhuta jnana dassana. What do they imply in this connection? What do you think?
Then because we are putting jhana, also to
Any other ideas? Anyone from online? Yes. Yeah, so why I have put these two expressions is that I wanted to show you that these two expressions appear in the Suttanta text. These are not from Abhidhamma, but I wanted to show you that the kind of approach that Abhidhammikas have taken actually can be seen in a different form in the Suttantas as well. For example, when you read this statement, Janatu ahang bhikkave passato asavanang khayang vadami. I speak of the destruction of asava for somebody who knows and sees. No ajanato, no apassato. Not for someone who does not know and does not see. So, what does it mean by asavanang khayang? Destruction of asava, extinction of asava. Somebody who becomes an arahant is freed from asava. An arahant is somebody who experiences nirvana. Now here the Buddha is saying that I talk of ending of asava for somebody who knows and sees, not for anyone. Who can experience this nirvana, who can attain this nirvana, is somebody who can see and who can know what? the Four Noble Truths, for example, right? The reality as it is, that is expressed in the following statement: Yatha bhuta yana darsana. Knowing and seeing of things as they really are. Right? So I put these two expressions just to show you that when you have this idea that Abhidhamma teachings are very difficult because it is presented systematically, logically, philosophically, I wanted to show you that similar expressions can be found in the suttas as well, but they are put in a different way. Okay, but they are actually talking about the same thing. Early version of the Dhamma theory. So when there is a discussion of Dhamma theory, when you talk about the early version, that is particularly referred to the presentation of Dhamma theory in the Suttanta. So this analysis of, Nama and Rupa as they appear in the Suttanta. So there are 5 methods that are found to be present in the Suttanta teaching that represent analysis of empiric individuality and its relation to the external world. Empiric individuality. Individuality and empiric individuality. What is the difference between these two expressions? Individuality, when you say individuality, that means there is an understanding of self-idea that is present, that is individuality. That is different from other identity, right? My individuality is different from your individuality. But when it says empiric individuality, this is in a conventional term, practical usage. I make use of the term I am me, my name is this and that. That is more for the practical purpose. Essentially, there is no I and you. And its relation to the external world. So when I have identified myself to be me, then how I connect myself to other things external to me. So the first presentation is in terms of Nama Rupa. 2 main components, mental and corporeal aspects of individuality. However, we must not overlook here that Nama Rupa, when it occurs in the 12-factored formula of dependent arising, conveys a more specific sense. In this specific sense, Nama means life mental factors that invariably arise with consciousness, namely feeling, perception, volition, contact, and attention. Rupa in Nama Rupa means the 4 great material elements and the materiality that depends on them. In this specific sense, therefore, we cannot consider Nama Rupa as an exhaustive definition of the empiric individuality. So here, Professor Karunadasa is making a differentiation between the common usage of Nama Rupa as it is found in the Suttanta to refer to this empiric individuality, and the phrase Nama Rupa when it appears in the 12-linked formula of dependent origination. Vijnana Pachaya, Nama Rupa. Right? So he just points out that one has to be careful in the usage of these expressions and also even in their translations. Why? Because when this expression appear in the 12 links of dependent origination, it is particularly referring to the mental factors and physical or material elements of a person when he is living. Okay. So apart from that, apart from his living experience, it does not include other aspects of it, other aspects of one's existence. So that is why it says, in this specific sense, therefore, we cannot consider Nama Rupa as an exhaustive definition of the empiric individuality. So probably what he's referring to here is that there could be different state of functioning of mind and body, especially the mind, right? But in the 12-factored formula, it is particularly referring to life mental factors and the material elements, also upadaya rupa, secondary matters, that are active when somebody is living. It does not include everything that is associated with the empiric individuality. So there is a slight difference. Whereas generally when you talk about nama and rupa, you include everything, right? The empiric individuality. Nama Rupa represents only a part of the individuality, the other part being represented by Vijnana, which is consciousness. That Vijnana is not part of Nama is shown not only by the statement that Nama Rupa has Vijnana as its condition, Vijnana Pachaya Nama Rupam, but also by the other statement that Vijnana has in turn Nama Rupa as its condition, Nama Rupa Pachaya Vijnana. What both statements show is the reciprocal conditionality of Vijnana and Nama Rupa, and not that one could be subsumed under the other. Vijnana Pachaya Nama Rupa, Nama Rupa Pachaya Vijnana. Reciprocal conditionality. When it says Vijnana Pachaya Nama Rupa, Vijnana becomes the cause and condition for the arising of Nama Rupa. And when it says Nama Rupa Pachaya Vijnana, Nama Rupa becomes the cause and condition giving rise to Vijnana. This should be understood in relation to two subsequent lives, present life and next life, or past life and this life. So when there is a change of life, okay, the dying moment and the rebirth moment, there is a consciousness that is called relinking consciousness, Padisandhi Vijnana. So there is Chuti Chitta, and then there is Padisandhi Chitta. Now, not just in relation to different lifetimes that it has to be understood. I think probably in the continuation of the momentary consciousness, probably it could be applicable. But if you take up this understanding of conditionality of Vijnana in different lifetimes, the Vijnana of the previous life functions as a condition for the arising of Nama Rupa in the next life. Right? But then again, this Nama Rupa conditions the arising of the next Vijnana also. So this is in terms of precedence or primacy. What comes first? Okay? And it does not mean that exists. For example, if Vijnana arises, it exists without the body for a long period of time. What has been observed so far should show that it is not correct to translate indiscriminately Nama Rupa as mind and matter, or to define the psychophysical personality as consisting of Nama and Rupa. The textual or the doctrinal context should be taken into consideration to determine whether the two terms are used in the general or in the specific sense. So he's just pointing it out that whenever you talk about Nama and Rupa, you have to know that, in what context you are using this expression. Are you using it in the sense of empiric individuality, or you are discussing about this Nama Rupa as part of the 12 factors of dependent origination? Because when you talk about 12 factors of dependent origination, it has a specific meaning and a specific purpose. Otherwise, in the 12 factors of dependent origination, starting with avidya, everything can be subsumed in the Nama Rupa. When you talk about avidya, ignorance, where does it stay? Right? Avidya is also part of your mental functioning. Right? So they should be understood in terms of importance given to each different factor. It does not mean that every factor is existing separately. So in my understanding, if I want to make it simpler for you, there are 12 factors in the explanation of dependent origination theory. Nama Rupa represents just one of the 12 factors. Whereas when you talk about Nama Rupa of the empiric individuality, it includes all 12 factors. You see the difference? It will be more clear later on. The second analysis that can be found in the Suttanta is Panchakanda. An individual is explained in terms of 5 aggregates. You are very well familiar with these 5 aggregates: Rupa Kanda, Vedana Kanda, Sanya Kanda, Sankhara Kanda, and Vijnana Kanda, right? And thirdly, it is explained in terms of 6 dhatus: Pathavi, Apo, Tejo, Vayu, Akasa, and Vijnana. Pathavi means earth, Apo, water, Tejo, fire, Vayu, air, Akasa, space, and Vijnana, consciousness. So in these 2 analyses, you see that when it is presented in terms of 5 aggregates, Rupa just one, that is representative of physical aspect. The other 4 represent mental aspect. So it is an analysis of the mental aspect: Vedana, Sanya, Sankhara, Vijnana. Whereas in the analysis of 6 dhatus, Vijnana is just one, and the other 5 represent the elements of physical aspect. Right? So it seems like these 2 analyses complement each other. Note that in the second analysis, attention is focused more on mental aspects, and in the third, on the other hand, attention is focused more on non-mental aspects. It is very likely that the 2 analyses were made to supplement each other. The other presentation is in terms of 12 ayatanas, 6 ajjatika and 6 bahidha, internal and external. What are the internal ayatanas? Chakku. Chakku means eyes, sota, ears, Ghana, nose, Jibha, tongue, Kaya, body, and Mano, mind. What are the Bahita external factors? Rupa, forms, Sabda, sound, Gandha, smell or odor, Rasa, taste, Pottabba, touch, and Dhamma, thoughts. So these are the 12 ayatanas. This is another analysis of empiric individuality. And there is one more, that is in terms of dhatus, 18 dhatus. So in this analysis, you have these 12 ayatanas as mentioned in number 4, plus 6 vijnana, 6 types of consciousness associated with these ayatanas, namely Chakku vijnana, Sota vijnana, Ghana vijnana, Diha vijnana, Kaya vijnana, and Mano vijnana. Right? You can look at this picture here. It shows 18 dhatus and 5 khandas in terms of objects, faculties, and consciousness. So you have Chakku, Rupa, Sota, Chakku, Rupa, Chakku vijnana, Sota, Saddha, Sota vijnana, Ghana, Gandha, Ghana vijnana, Jibha, Rasa, Jiva vijnana, Kaya, Pottabba, Kaya vijnana, Mano, Dhamma, Mano vijnana. Any questions so far?
Teachers, I still not understand what you have explained.
What is it? You can write down if you find it difficult to, say because of different situations.
For the 6 about object. Yeah.
The Vijnanas are named after Indriyas, right? 6 Indriyas. Why they are not named after the objects? Then instead of Chakku Vijnana, it should be Rupa Vijnana, right? But that doesn't make sense because it is ultimately your perception, your understanding. You say something and I also say the same thing. You have a different perception, I have a different perception. The object remains the same probably. I still not understand what you explain. The end slide. End slide. Why it is difficult to understand? This is the end slide. This is the one that you have discussed just now, right?
Yes, teacher, yes.
What is the difficulty? Oh, you mean the chart?
Yeah,
Why?
yeah,
The
teachers.
chart is very clear. You have objects, faculties, and consciousness. This is presented different way actually. Objects first. But anyway, this is clearly understood. You have Chakku, Sota, Ghana, Jibba, and Kaya. And then you have Rupa, Saddha, Gandha, Rasa, Pottabha. So you have 5 Indriyas, and then 5 objects, and then 5 consciousness. So this consciousness come under Vijnana category. That is very clear. Now talking about the 6th one, for the 6th one, it is called Indriya is mind, mental faculty, and then the object of Indriya is thoughts. So that also comes in the sphere of mind, and then it is Manovijnana. So therefore, this comes under these 2 category. Okay, in terms of mind, and Manovijnana, it comes under Vijnana. In terms of thoughts, it represents Vedana, Sanya, Sankara. In the Abhidhamma analysis, you would find Vijnana to be presented as Chitta. These 3, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, to be presented as Chatasika, and Rupa as form, material aspect, right? So this Indriyas, Chakku, Sota, Ghana, and this Rupa, Sabda, this represent Rupa. Is it clear now?
Yes, yes, teacher. It's clear
Yes.
now.
Okay.
Thank you, teacher.
Yeah, welcome. So, any other question or remark? When you say empiric individuality, the focus is how your personality, your individual existence is functioning empirically. So in that case, for example, even when we talk about enlightened beings, when they have been functioning in the world, they also have an empiric individuality in the sense that they are persons, they walk, they talk, right? They eat, they sleep, how they communicate with people, right? But without grasping, without having any kind of grasping towards the existence of identity or self. So when you just separately talk about just individuality, that refers to individual, existence of a self. So empiric qualifies it. It is like talking about, in a way, conventional and ultimate truth. Conventionally, everything is real, but this is in the conventional world. But ultimately, for example, in the ultimate sense, in the understanding of Nagarjuna, as we have been discussing, there is no samsara, there is no nirvana, there is no suffering, there is no happiness, you see. So that is in a different level. That is a different understanding. Of course, yes. When the Buddhas and Arahants, they are saying that now I am going to teach you, you pay close attention. Most of the time you would find this expression in the suttas, right? So he is referring to himself as I. That is empiric individuality in a conventional world. Otherwise, he can say that, Buddha referred to himself I, and then again he is saying that there is no I, and he is making me confused. Okay, I think Venerable Kamar wants to say something, right?
Maybe if I have a chance.
Maybe. You have a chance now. If you have something you can say.
Yeah, yes, teacher. Thank you. So I want to ask, like we have Rupa and Chaku, one bit, so it becomes a mind, Chaku Vijnana. So it's just go itself, and like Chaku Vijnana just go itself. And so Chaku Vijnana is a kind of mind, right? It's a mano.
Yeah.
Mana. And so that mana is connect to, on the other hand, we other part we have like mana and dhamma, so they combine and to become mana or vijnana, mano vijnana. So that rupa saku one is becomes jaku vijnana, is go to connect to the mana and dhamma. That do they connect, and do they go?
Of course, yes, true. Okay, so for example, you.
Why we count is as 6?
Okay, I'll tell you now. When you see something, previously we have been talking about looking at a flower. You see a flower, a red colored flower, just like whenever Narinda has a red colored flower here, right? So because of your eye sense organ, you see the object, red colored flower. It is called Chakku Vijnana, the consciousness or understanding that you have of this object. It is called Chakku Vijnana, but that is only at the moment when you see it, when you perceive it. You have an understanding that this is a red flower, and this is from your garden. This is not from my garden. So you see it, and you have an understanding that is Chakku Vijnana. But when you leave from that place, when you are not paying attention to that flower, that garden, you move from that side, you have a memory of that flower, that event, that becomes your thoughts, and that can be object of your manovijnana, because you are thinking about this. So that is how it is connected.
Right. So firstly it's becomes Jaku Vijnana, and then it's continue as Dhamma Vijnana. Right.
Yes.
Right. Thank you.
I have to limit how many you can ask. I have to limit. Okay. Yeah. Momentariness of external form. Right. That is in the momentary consciousness. In terms of cause and effect, in terms of vibration, or how do you say, impression that it creates, impression, mental impression that it creates. Karma also transmits that way. No, how is it possible? Because there is a deeper aspect of your consciousness, right? So there is an underlying process that is going on. Of course, it is going on in the sense of momentary existence, but a kind of identity is maintained, but not in the sense of fixed identity. How it can be explained is that, okay, if somebody pinch you, okay, you have a pain, right? You have a pain now, and after sometimes the pain is gone, but the memory is there. Even next day, if you remember that somebody pinched, you may feel a little bit of pain in the mind, not in the body. You can experience, relate to that pain. But now if you compare the pain that you had at the time of pinching and the imagination or experience of pain that you have next day, Is it same or different? Completely different, but it is because of this. So it clearly explains the impression that you had, but you do not always feel pain, only when you remember. You see? And then in terms of continuity, it should be understood as cause and effect, previous moment giving rise to the next moment. That's all. There is nothing fixed that is transmitting. It is only in the sense of cause and effect. So when you talk about karma and vipaka, actually every moment it is taking place. Every moment. The only thing is that you have very visible experience of karma and vipaka when a certain other causes and conditions come together. For example, the thought of dying and the actual death. You see? Because of this thought of dying, people are frightened. Feels like every moment they are dying. And what about the moment of actual death? Probably it could be completely different. So when you are thinking about it, you are experiencing the vipaka here and now. But it also differs in terms of severity. It depends on how strong your mind is. Okay, I think, oh, goodness. So today, this is the end of our discussion today. I think we can end our class here. Thank you for joining. See you next week. Thank you very much.
See you, teacher.
See you. Bye-bye.